The ground you walk on was once worshipped as a living goddess. In the heart of ancient Sumer, the earth itself had a name and a spirit, Ninhursag, the primordial mother of all. By the end of this, you will understand the epic stories of this forgotten creator and why her power was absolute. We will uncover why she cursed a fellow god to death and the astonishing way she brought him back. What does it mean to see our world not as a resource but as a divine parent? Her true name was a chorus of power, each title revealing a different face of the world she was. She was Ninhursag, the Lady of the Mountain, the one who raised the rugged, life-giving highlands from the flat plain. She was Kai, the earth itself, the solid ground beneath every city and field. To the people, she was also Ninmah, the exalted lady, a name that sang of her supreme status, and Nintur, the Lady of the Birth Hut, the tender midwife presiding over the creation of every living thing. Each of these names was a key, unlocking a different facet of her divine authority. As the Lady of the Mountain, she commanded the wild, untamed places where stone met sky. As the Lady of the Birth Hut, she held the intimate, sacred power of life's beginning. This was not a collection of minor spirits, but the many roles of a single, overwhelming presence. She stood as one of the 7 great Anunnaki, the deities who decreed the fates of humanity. While others ruled the sky or the underworld, Ninhursag was the foundation. She was the living soil, the source from which all nourishment sprang and to which all life would eventually return. The entire civilization of Sumer was built literally upon her body, a truth so fundamental it shaped their every prayer and harvest. Her authority was woven into the very fabric of existence, a power that placed her at the right hand of the king of the gods. Ninhursag was the great Earth Mother, the consort and often the equal of Anu, the sky god who ruled the celestial realm. Together, they represented the fundamental duality of the universe, the fertile earth meeting the vast, life-giving sky. This was not a minor partnership. She was one of the primordial beings present at the very moment of creation, a foundational force who helped shape the world from its chaotic beginnings. While other gods like Enlil, lord of the air and storms, wielded power from a distance, commanding winds and decrees, Ninhursag's domain was immediate and tangible. You could feel it under your feet and taste it in the food you grew. Her authority was the soil itself, and from that single source flowed her control over everything that mattered to a fledgling civilization. She commanded agriculture, dictating the success or failure of the barley and wheat. She presided over fertility, ensuring that not only crops but also animals and people could thrive and multiply. The very substance of the mortal world, the clay and stone used to build the first cities, was an extension of her body. This made her utterly indispensable. The gods in their high temples relied on the offerings that sprang from her soil, and humanity knew their survival was a direct gift from her. She was not a distant celestial figure, but the ground of all being, the nurturing mother upon whose back all life was built. In the beginning, there was only a single, unified mountain of being. This was the primordial world, a place where the sky and the earth were locked in an endless embrace. And the heavens and Kai, the earth, were one. Ninhursag as Kai was not just the ground, she was half of this cosmic whole, a divine entity fused with her consort Anu. From this union, the first generation of gods was born, including their powerful son, the storm god Enlil, and it was Enlil who would perform a world-shattering act. He forced his way between his parents, prying the sky away from the earth. Anu was lifted high into the celestial realm, and Kai, our goddess, was left below, now defined as the solid ground beneath the vast, empty air. This was not a gentle parting. It was a violent, necessary separation that created the very condition for our existence. That new space between them, forged by Enlil, became the atmosphere, the habitable world where life could finally take root and breathe. Think about the air around you. That space is the direct result of this divine separation. It is the gap that allows for storms and breezes, for birds to fly and for us to live. Though torn from her other half, Ninhursag as Kai did not become a distant or diminished figure. Far from it. Her body became the fertile, undulating landscape, the source of all that grows. The mountains were her breasts, the rivers her lifeblood, the rich soil her flesh. Every plant that pushed through the earth was a testament to her enduring creative power, a power that continued to flow even after the cosmic separation. She was the foundation, now more than ever, the stable ground from which all life would spring forth. But this newly formed world was a blank and barren canvas. For life to truly flourish, the nurturing earth required a partner. That partner was Enki, the god of wisdom, fresh water, and the deep creative arts. If Ninhursag was the solid ground, then Enki was the fluid intelligence that flowed through it. He was the master of the Abzu, the vast underground ocean of fresh water that was believed to be the source of all springs, rivers, and lakes. His domain was not the destructive salt sea, but the sweet, life-giving water that made the desert bloom. Together, Ninhursag and Enki formed the ultimate creative team. She provided the substance, the clay of the earth itself, and he provided the blueprint and the vital moisture. Their partnership was the divine recipe for all existence. Think of a potter at a wheel. Ninhursag was the rich, pliable clay, the very material of creation. Enki was the water that made the clay workable, and the clever hands that shaped it into purposeful forms. One was useless without the other. Dry clay crumbles and cracks, while water without form is just a shapeless puddle. It was only through their union that the world could be sculpted. They did not just create life, they engineered the very systems that sustained it. They worked in concert to direct the flow of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, filling them from the Abzu, so that Ninhursag's soil could be irrigated and made fertile. They populated the marshes with reeds and fish, the plains with grains, and the highlands with trees. Their collaboration was the engine of civilization itself, turning a stark landscape into a garden of abundance where cities could eventually rise. This was a profound and powerful alliance, a meeting of two complementary forces that seemed destined to build the world in harmony. Yet, when two such immense creative powers are intertwined, their destinies can become a tangled web. For every act of creation holds the potential for misunderstanding, and every deep bond can be tested by the very power that forged it. Yet even this divinely sculpted world had a problem. The gods who inhabited it were growing weary. They were the rulers of the cosmos, but they were also its laborers, forced to dig the canals and till the fields to produce their own food. The work was endless and exhausting, far beneath their celestial dignity. A council was called among the great Anunnaki, and a radical solution was proposed. They would create a new being, a lesser creature to shoulder this burden for them. They would create humanity, and for this monumental task they turned to the one goddess whose power was the very essence of life itself, Ninhursag. She was the logical, the only choice. She had formed the landscape itself, and now she would form its caretakers. Her partner in this creation was once again the clever Enki. Together, they devised a profound and somewhat terrifying recipe for human life. They journeyed to the Abzu, Enki's domain of sweet, primordial waters. There, Ninhursag gathered pure clay from its depths, the very substance of the earth, her own body. But clay alone could only make a statue. To give it life, to give it a soul and a purpose, required something more potent. The gods selected one of their own, a deity who had rebelled against the heavy labor, and put him to death. Into the lifeless clay, Ninhursag and Enki mixed the blood of this slain god. This was the secret ingredient. It was divine consciousness, the spark of a soul, now bound to mortal matter. Ninhursag, as the divine midwife, then took this mixture and began to shape it. She pinched and formed the figures, acting as the ultimate potter at the wheel of existence. She did not merely sculpt their bodies, she breathed life into them, serving as the first midwife at the first birth of all humankind. This single act cemented her identity as the mother of all living. Every human being was quite literally a piece of the earth animated by a fragment of the divine. This is why she became Nintur, the lady of the birth hut. From that first creation onward, she was present at every human birth, the patroness of midwives and the protector of every mother and newborn. She was not a distant creator, but an intimate, ever-present guardian of life's most vulnerable and sacred moment. Humanity was born from her soil and her hands, forever connecting us to the earth, not just as a place, but as a parent. Yet this perfect world needed a sacred heart, a place where the earth's original innocence remained untouched. That place was Dilmun. Imagine a land of impossible purity, a garden where the sun rose each day on a world without pain. In Dilmun, the lion did not hunt the lamb, for no creature knew violence or fear. Sickness was a forgotten word, and old age never crept in to claim a life. The very air was fragrant with blossoms, and fresh water sprang freely from the ground, nourishing fields that bore fruit without end. This was Ninhursag's personal sanctuary, a living reflection of her own body in its most perfect and uncorrupted state. Dilmun was not just a location, it was an ideal, the earth as it was always meant to be, a paradise under the direct care of the Mother Goddess. And it is here, within this pristine garden, that her legendary partnership with Enki would be tested in a story of creation, transgression, and a curse born from the deepest of betrayals. But even paradise has its price, and the water that brought life to Dilmun came from a single source. The god Enki, at the request of the sun god Utu, commanded the life-giving waters of the Abzu to rise from the deep and flood the land's canals. With this gift, Ninhursag's garden exploded into a riot of color and life. Lush plants and trees bore fruit in impossible abundance, and the land became the paradise it was destined to be. Yet Enki, the very architect of this perfection, would become its greatest threat. He was the god of fluid intelligence and restless creativity, a force that could build worlds but could not resist its own impulses. He walked through the garden he had helped to water, and his gaze fell upon Ninhursag's own daughter, the goddess Ninsar, also known as Lady Greenery. He was drawn to her vibrant, youthful life, and he seduced her. From their union, a daughter was born, the goddess Ninkara, Lady Pasture. Ninhursag watched this, perhaps with a mother's wary eye, but the true violation was yet to come. Enki did not stop. He then sought out his own daughter, Ninkara, and seduced her as well. From this forbidden union came another goddess, Atu, the weaver, the goddess of plants and cloth. The pattern was clear and horrifying. Enki was systematically moving through the generations born from Ninhursag's own line, consuming the family tree as he went. His final act was to pursue his own granddaughter, Atu. He came to her, and through deception, he seduced her too. This was the ultimate betrayal, a violation of the sacred order within Ninhursag's own sanctuary. But the story takes an even more bizarre and symbolic turn. After each union, Enki did something that seems unthinkable. From his couplings with Ninsar, Ninkara, and Atu, magical plants sprang forth. These were not just any plants, they were the living embodiments of the goddesses he had wronged. And one by one, Enki found these plants and he consumed them. He ate the very symbols of the generations he had created and defiled. This was more than just a metaphor, it was a divine act of cannibalism, a consumption of his own offspring. When Ninhursag learned of this final act, that Enki had not only seduced her granddaughter, but had then eaten the plant that was her essence, her patience shattered. The nurturing mother vanished, replaced by a fury as absolute as the earth itself. She looked upon Enki, the partner with whom she had built the world, and saw only a gluttonous, destructive force. In a voice that shook the foundations of Dilmun, she placed a curse upon him. She swore that she would never look upon him with the eye of life again. She declared that he would sicken, that he would wither, and that he would die. And with that, she vanished, leaving the once perfect garden and the god she condemned to his fate. The curse was not an empty threat. The moment the words left her lips, Enki began to die. Sickness seized his body, and one by one, 8 parts of him began to fail. A crippling pain took root in his rib, a weakness seized his tooth, a terrible ache filled his jaw. Each affliction was a testament to Ninhursag's power, a reminder that the life she gave, she could also take away. The other gods looked on in horror. Without Enki's wisdom and his control of the sweet waters, the entire order of the world was threatened. They pleaded with him, but he was too far gone, rotting from the inside out. The great god of wisdom was being destroyed by the one force he could not outsmart, the righteous wrath of the earth itself. The other gods watched in mounting terror as Enki's body began to decay. The god of wisdom, the source of all fresh water and creative thought, was succumbing to a sickness no other deity could cure. A deep, grinding agony settled into his jaw, rendering him unable to speak his clever words. A sharp, persistent pain took root in his rib as if his very framework was splintering. One by one, 8 distinct parts of his body failed, each affliction a physical echo of Ninhursag's righteous rage. This was not a simple illness, it was a divine unraveling, a systematic withdrawal of the life force she had always provided. The foundations of the world began to tremble. Canals started to silt up without his guidance, and the flow of the sweet waters from the Abzu grew uncertain. The gods faced a future without his essential intelligence, a world sliding back toward chaos. They begged him for a solution, but the words would not come. In their desperation, they had no choice but to seek out the one being whose power had caused this crisis. They went to the vanished mother, pleading with Ninhursag to relent. At first, her heart remained as hard as stone. Why should she save the one who had so deeply violated the sacred bonds of her own lineage? But the gods persisted, arguing not for Enki's virtue, but for the survival of the world they had built together. The fate of all creation hung in the balance. Finally, something within her shifted. The nurturing mother, the source of all life, could not let the entire cosmos wither because of one god's transgression. Her anger was absolute, but her capacity for creation was even greater. She returned to Enki's side, but she did not simply wave her hand and heal him. She performed an act of creation so specific, so ingenious that it would become legendary. She sat beside his suffering form, and from her own divine body, she gave birth to 8 new deities. Each one was not a general healer, but a specialist conceived for a single, precise purpose. She birthed a god to cure the pain in his tooth and another to mend the sickness in his mouth. She created a deity for his aching jaw and another for his afflicted face. Most famously, to cure the agonizing pain in his rib, she gave birth to a goddess she named Nintur. And here lies one of the most profound twists in all of mythology. The name Nintur carries a breathtaking double meaning. It translates directly to Lady of the Rib, the divine cure for Enki's specific ailment. But in the Sumerian language, the word Tai also means to make live. So Nintur, the healer born from the curse, is also the Lady of Life. With this single act, Ninhursag demonstrated her ultimate authority. She held the power to curse and to cure, to inflict death and to grant life. She did not just defeat the sickness, she transformed it. From Enki's suffering, she birthed an entire pantheon of healing, turning the consequence of his sin into a source of salvation for the world. Life itself sprang directly from the heart of illness. As each new deity went to work, touching the afflicted part of Enki's body, the god of wisdom was restored. The pain in his rib vanished under Nintur's touch, and with it the shadow of death receded. The crisis was averted, but the balance of power was forever clarified. The cleverest god had been laid low, and his life was only given back by the grace of the Great Mother. She was the beginning and the end, the womb and the tomb, the source of both the wound and the remedy. This story is far more than a divine quarrel. It is a masterclass in symbolism, a map of the human condition written in the language of gods. At its core, the myth reveals the eternal dance between two fundamental forces. Enki represents fluid, untamed creativity, the spark of intellect that knows no bounds. He is the river that overflows its banks, the idea that proliferates without check. Ninhursag is the solid, nurturing earth, the foundation that gives form and sustenance to that creativity. Their partnership is essential, but it is also inherently tense. One must build while the other must sometimes restrain. This is the delicate balance of any ecosystem, any society, any act of creation. Enki's transgressions are not merely personal sins. They are the chaos that emerges when creative impulse refuses to respect the sacred forms that contain it. He consumes the generations born from the earth, a potent metaphor for exploitation, for taking without regard for the source. And the earth, in turn, responds not with petty vengeance, but with the absolute consequence of withdrawal. Her curse is the desertification of the spirit, the withering that occurs when the source of life turns away. Yet the myth does not end in eternal punishment. It moves toward a profound reconciliation. Ninhursag's wrath is real and justified, but her capacity for healing is even greater. She does not simply forgive and forget. She actively transforms the poison into its own antidote. From Enki's 8 afflictions, she births 8 healing deities. This is the ultimate alchemy, turning the very symptoms of the disease into the specialists who can cure it. It is a powerful declaration that the remedy is often found within the nature of the wound itself. The birth of Ninti, the Lady of the Rib, who is also the Lady of Life, is the perfect emblem of this truth. It suggests that life and death, sickness and health are not opposites but two sides of the same coin, forever intertwined. This is the origin story of medicine itself, born not from a sterile laboratory, but from the fertile, suffering body of a god and the creative compassion of the Earth Mother. It tells us that cures reside within the natural world, waiting to be discovered by those who understand its deep, cyclical logic. The reconciliation between Enki and Ninhursag is not a return to their old, carefree partnership. It is a new, more mature balance forged in the fires of crisis. He has learned the limits of his boundless curiosity, and she has reaffirmed her role not just as the giver of life, but as its ultimate restorer. Their story is a cycle mirroring the cycles of the natural world it explains. The earth gives life, that life is tested by chaos and suffering, and from that suffering, new forms of healing and understanding are born, ensuring the continuum of existence. It is a myth that offers a startlingly hopeful vision, that even the deepest fractures can be mended, and that from our greatest pains can emerge our most profound sources of salvation. You can see her power carved into ancient stone, a visual language meant for a world where few could read. The Sumerians did not leave us lengthy theological texts, but they left us her image, repeated across seals and statues so that anyone, from a king to a farmer, would know the Mother Goddess at a glance. Her most striking feature is the crown she wears, a headdress marked by the distinct shape of the Greek letter omega. This was not a random decoration. That curved, open symbol was a direct representation of the womb, an unmistakable sign of her role as the source of all life. It was the universal emblem of birth, declaring her authority over creation itself. Alongside this, she often holds the rod and ring, the twin symbols of divine justice and authority. These were not mere ornaments, but the Mesopotamian equivalents of a scepter and orb, signifying her power to measure the cosmos and decree the fates. She was a queen whose throne was the very earth. To reinforce her identity as the Lady of the Mountain, artists depicted her with a skirt made of layered, scale-like patterns, a stylized representation of the rugged foothills and peaks she commanded. These were not gentle slopes, but the powerful, life-giving highlands where the first waters gathered. And in the most intimate portrayals, she is shown holding a young child to her breast or surrounded by suckling animals. Here, the exalted lady becomes the nurturing mother, the direct source of sustenance for all her creations. A lion cub at her feet was not a threat, but a testament to her domain over the wild, fertile world. Every element of her iconography was a deliberate choice, a symbol that conveyed a complex truth to the worshipper. The omega for the womb, the rod and ring for authority, the mountain skirt for her domain, and the child for her nurturing care. Seeing her image was like reading a prayer, a silent recognition that the ground beneath their feet was a living, breathing, and deeply powerful divine mother. Her sacred animals were a walking map of her power. The gentle cow stood for her nurturing side, a living symbol of the life-giving milk that sustained both gods and mortals. But at her feet you would often find the lion, a creature of untamed strength and raw power. This was not a contradiction, but a complete picture. She was the lady of the beasties, the sovereign over all wild things, and the lion at her side was a testament to her absolute authority over the fertile and sometimes dangerous natural world. She commanded the docile herds that fed civilization and the fearsome predators that ruled the wilderness, embodying the full spectrum of life. This connection to the living world extended deep into the soil itself. In the myth of Dilmun, we saw plants spring directly from the essence of the goddesses Enki wronged. These were not ordinary plants, but sacred flora, the very embodiment of divine life force. Ninhursag was intrinsically linked to the trees that provided wood and shelter, and the grains that became the staff of life. Every stalk of barley, every cluster of dates was a direct gift from her body. She was not a distant overseer of agriculture, she was the fertile ground from which it sprouted. To understand her connection to a fig tree or a field of wheat was to understand that you were looking at a piece of the goddess herself, a living testament to her endless, abundant creativity. If you wanted to find the living heart of Ninhursag, you would travel to the city of E-Kesh. This was her sacred ground, the epicenter of her worship, where her primary temple, the E-Kesh, rose from the plain. Its name meant simply the house of Kesh, but it was far more than a building. It was a conduit, a place where the divine energy of the Earth Mother was believed to be most concentrated. While little remains today but foundations and scattered bricks, archaeologists have pieced together a picture of a significant religious complex, a place where the community's relationship with the goddess was made tangible through daily ritual. Here, a dedicated priesthood, likely including both men and women, acted as the intermediaries between humanity and the mother of all living. They were the caretakers of her sacred space, the interpreters of her will, and the performers of the rites that ensured her continued favor. Their most vital duty was to sustain the goddess herself through a constant cycle of offerings. Twice a day, they would present lavish meals to her cult statue, feeding the divine presence that dwelled among them. These were not symbolic gestures. They believed that the goddess literally consumed the essence of this food, and that if the offering stopped, her power would wane and the land would suffer. The menu was a tribute to her domain, featuring the finest barley bread, dates from her orchards, choice cuts of meat, and libations of beer and milk. This was the practical, daily work of worshipping the earth, a constant reminder that the goddess who provided all nourishment required nourishment in return. But Kesh was not her only home. Her worship was a thread woven through the fabric of many great cities. In the city of Adab, she was revered under the name Nintur, and her temple there was a center for women praying for safe childbirth. In the mighty city of she shared sacred space with other great deities, her presence a foundational element in the spiritual life of the empire. From the smallest village to the grandest capital, her altars were places of profound and personal petition. A farmer would bring the first sheaf of his harvest, an offering of gratitude for the soil's fertility. A pregnant woman and her family would pray fervently for her protection during the dangerous hours of labor, begging the lady of the birth hut to watch over them. A king would make a lavish donation, seeking her blessing for the health and abundance of the entire nation. every prayer, whether whispered by a commoner or proclaimed by a ruler, acknowledged the same fundamental truth that their lives, their children, and their food were all direct gifts from the body of the earth. This was not an abstract faith, it was a daily, intimate relationship with the ground they walked on. But the power of the Earth Mother was not confined to the sacred temple. It flowed directly into the throne room. For a Sumerian king, divine favor was not a vague spiritual concept, it was the absolute bedrock of his political authority. He could not rule by force alone, he needed a mandate from the gods, and there was no more foundational endorsement than that of Ninhursag. Kings understood that their right to rule was a gift, and they went to great lengths to present themselves as the chosen sons of the Great Mother. In royal inscriptions carved into stone for eternity, they did not call themselves conquerors first, but rather her beloved nurslings, her adopted children, suckled at her own divine breast. This was the ultimate political strategy, framing their kingship as a natural extension of the earth's own nurturing order. A king named Gudea, who ruled the city-state of Lagash, left behind some of the most telling evidence. In his hymns, he describes Ninhursag as the one who truly granted him the scepter, the one who set the divine crown upon his head. He speaks of her not as a distant patron, but as a personal mother who shaped his very being for leadership. This was more than flattery, it was a public declaration that his rule was as natural and justified as a child's place beside its parent. His authority was woven into the fabric of the world she embodied. Other rulers followed this template meticulously. They would depict themselves in art being held by the goddess or being offered the symbols of kingship directly from her hands. By claiming this intimate familial bond, a king was making an unassailable argument to his people. He was arguing that to obey him was to obey the natural order itself, to honor the will of the earth that fed them all. His laws were her laws, his prosperity was a sign of her continued favor. This connection made Ninhursag a central pillar in the structure of the state. Her temples received lavish royal donations, and her priests held significant influence because supporting her cult was synonymous with supporting the stability of the kingdom itself. The king's primary duty was to be the bridge between the people and the gods, and Ninhursag was the most fundamental of those divine connections. If she turned her face away, the king would lose his legitimacy, the fields would fail, and the entire social order would collapse. So when you look at these ancient kings, you are not just looking at political figures, you are looking at men who built their entire power on a single, profound idea, that to rule the people, you must first be a cherished child of the living earth. Yet the Earth Mother who gave life was also bound to grieve its loss. A different voice emerges from the clay tablets, not of a queen or a creator, but of a mother weeping in the ruins. The Sumerian lamentation texts reveal Ninhursag in her most vulnerable aspect, her power transmuted into pure, unending sorrow. When the divine decree went forth and her sacred cities were put to the torch, she did not rage or command. She mourned. She is depicted wandering through the desolate streets of places like and Nippur, her cries echoing through the empty temples. She tears at her hair and her fine robes, her divine heart shattered by the sight of her children lying lifeless in the dust. These are not the calculated tears of a distant deity, but the raw, gut-wrenching grief of a parent who has lost everything. She weeps not only for the slain gods and the fallen kings, but for every common person, for the mothers and the farmers, for the entire human family she had once shaped with her own hand. In these texts she cries out, "My city has been destroyed before me, my house has been ravaged before me, my children have been scattered before me. Every death is a personal wound." This profound sorrow reveals the ultimate consequence of her deep connection to creation. To be the mother of all living is to feel the pain of all dying. Her nurturing nature means she feels every loss with an intensity that mirrors her creative power. This adds a profound layer of pathos to her image, transforming the formidable earth goddess into a figure of immense emotional depth. The same hands that pinched the first human from clay are the same hands that are now raised to a forehead in despair. She is the source of life, and therefore she is the one who truly understands the cost of its extinction. How does a goddess bear the weight of such grief? She carries it because she has no other choice. The destruction of a city was not just a political event, it was a tear in the sacred fabric of the world, a wound upon her own body, and she felt it as acutely as a physical blow. This is the hidden heart of the myth, the emotional truth that makes her power so relatable and so deeply human. The Great Mother does not just give life and rule over it, she loves it, and that love makes her eternally vulnerable to its suffering. The same earth that gave life also opened to receive it in the end. As the solid ground beneath all things, Ninhursag held a quiet but essential role in the realm of death. While her sister Ereshkigal ruled as the terrifying queen of the underworld, a distant and shadowy figure in a place of no return, Ninhursag's domain was the threshold. She was the living soil that welcomed the physical body home. When a person died, they were not thought to journey immediately to Ereshkigal's gloomy court. First, they were laid to rest within the arms of the Earth Mother, buried in the very clay from which they had been originally formed. This was not a punishment but a completion. The body, made from her substance, was now returning to its source, completing the sacred cycle that began with that first pinch of clay in the Abzu. Think of a seed. It grows from the soil, reaches for the sun, and in its season falls back to the ground to nourish the earth once more. Humanity followed this same natural rhythm, with Ninhursag as the beginning and the end of the physical journey. Because she had breathed life into the first humans, she maintained a deep interest in their ultimate fate. She was the mother watching over her children not only in the cradle but also at the grave. This connection made her a comforting presence in funerary rites. While Ereshkigal governed the spirits of the dead in their bleak afterlife existence, Ninhursag was the one invoked to grant a peaceful and gentle return. Prayers would ask for her to embrace the deceased kindly, to accept them back into her bosom without strife. This was a prayer for the body to decompose peacefully and become one with the earth again, ensuring the cycle of fertility could continue. It was a recognition that death was not an opposite to life, but its necessary counterpart, both governed by the same nurturing yet all-encompassing power. The Great Mother who presided over the birth hut also presided over the burial mound, her love for her creations extending beyond the final breath. To truly grasp Ninhursag's unique power, you must see her beside the other great goddesses who shared her sky. Inanna and her later Akkadian counterpart Ishtar commanded a dazzling array of domains. They were the goddesses of love and desire, of war and conflict, of the planet Venus shining brightly in the twilight. Their power was dynamic, political, and profoundly personal. Inanna's myths are stories of ambition and caprice, of her daring descent into the underworld and her tumultuous relationships. She was the force of raw emotion, of civilization's thrilling and often dangerous passions. Her authority was exercised in the throne room and on the battlefield, a power that could elevate a king or destroy a city based on her shifting moods. Now place Ninhursag next to this brilliant, volatile figure. Her domain was not the political sphere or the human heart, but something far more foundational. She was the raw, life-giving power of the earth itself. Where Inanna ruled the complex web of human society, Ninhursag was the very ground upon which that society was built. Inanna's power was charismatic and changeable like the weather. Ninhursag's was constant and deep like the bedrock. You could negotiate with Inanna, you could offer her gifts and praise to win her favor. You did not negotiate with Ninhursag. You either lived in harmony with her cycles or you perished. Her wrath, as we saw with Enki, was not a fleeting tantrum but the systemic withdrawal of life, as absolute and inevitable as a drought. This contrast defines her unique niche in the pantheon. Inanna was the queen of the city, its protector and its prize. Ninhursag was the mother of the land that fed the city, the source without which the city could not exist for a single season. One goddess represented the pinnacle of human achievement, the other represented the primordial foundation that made all achievement possible. One was the drama of history, the other was the constant, nurturing, and sometimes terrifying truth of nature. Yet the story of the Earth Mother did not end with the fall of Sumer. Her essence was far too fundamental to simply vanish. Instead, it flowed like a great underground river, resurfacing in new forms as Mesopotamian culture evolved. The Akkadians, who rose to power after the Sumerians, inherited this divine legacy, but they often refashioned it under different names. The most direct successor was the goddess Belet Ili, a title that literally means Lady of the Gods. This Akkadian deity was, in almost every respect, the same cosmic mother. She was celebrated in their creation myths as the womb of all life, the divine craftswoman who pinched clay to form the first humans alongside the god Enki. Her role as the patroness of childbirth remained central, a constant thread connecting her to Ninhursag's identity as Nintur, the Lady of the Birth Hut. This was not a replacement but a translation. The core functions of the Earth Goddess, her nurturing and creative power, were so vital to the worldview that they had to be preserved, even as the language of worship changed. But this process of syncretism, of blending deities together, also began to dilute her singular prominence. The mighty Ishtar, with her dazzling domains of love and war, absorbed some of the fertile, life-giving aspects of the older mother goddesses. Other local deities of fertility and childbirth also drew upon the archetype that Ninhursag so powerfully embodied. The result was a slow but steady fragmentation of her once absolute authority. She was no longer the sole, overwhelming Earth Mother of the Sumerian pantheon, but one source among several for the concept of divine femininity and creative power. Why did this happen? As empires grew and pantheons were consolidated, gods often became more specialized in their political and celestial roles. The intimate, foundational power of the earth, while still respected, was sometimes overshadowed by deities who directly intervened in human kingship and cosmic conflict. The nurturing soil became a backdrop for the dramas of the storm god and the love goddess. Yet this was not a disappearance, it was a transformation. The enduring human need for a mother goddess figure, a divine source of comfort and creation, ensured that the spirit of Ninhursag could never truly be erased. Her legacy lived on in every prayer for a safe delivery, in every offering made to the fertile field, and in the very understanding that the world was a living, generative being. Her power simply found new vessels, proving that the earth's deepest truths always find a way to be reborn. For centuries, her name was silent, buried under the very soil she once embodied. The rediscovery of Ninhursag is a story written not in clay, but in the dust of archaeological digs and the determined work of linguists. In the 19th century, European explorers began to unearth the great mounds of Mesopotamia, pulling the ghosts of cities like and Nippur from the earth. They found countless tablets inscribed with the intricate, wedge-shaped marks of cuneiform, a language utterly lost to time. For decades, these artifacts were silent puzzles. Then, through painstaking decipherment, the script began to speak. The names of gods and kings emerged from the stone, and among them, one name echoed with foundational power: Ninhursag. Scholars piecing together the epic of Gilgamesh or the creation myths suddenly encountered this powerful mother goddess, the very earth given a voice. It was a monumental moment in understanding human spirituality, the resurrection of a deity whose worship had ceased for thousands of years. Her stories, once the living faith of a civilization, were now historical texts, but they carried a weight that felt startlingly contemporary. The myth of her wrath against Enki for his gluttonous consumption of the sacred plants reads today not as a simple fable, but as a profound warning. His actions were a divine exploitation of the earth's bounty, a failure to respect the natural cycles she represented. Her response was the ultimate ecological consequence, a systemic withdrawal of life and health. This ancient narrative mirrors our own modern crisis, where the relentless consumption of resources leads to a sickened, unbalanced planet. The archetype of the Earth Mother that Ninhursag so powerfully represents has never been more relevant. We see her spirit in the concept of Mother Nature, a phrase we use to personify the living, breathing system of our world. We see her in modern ecological movements that argue for the intrinsic sacredness of the natural world, for seeing the earth not as a commodity to be owned and exhausted, but as a relational being to be honored and nurtured. The farmers of Sumer knew their survival was a gift from Ninhursag's body, a truth that modern industrial agriculture often forgets. Her myth forces a question we are only now, as a global society, beginning to confront with urgency. What happens when the creative, life-giving force of the world is pushed beyond its limits? The story of Dilmun's perfect garden, despoiled by unchecked desire, is our story of polluted rivers and disappearing forests. Ninhursag's return from obscurity is a gift, a chance to relearn an ancient lesson about balance, respect, and the true cost of taking without giving back. These ancient stories were not just whispered myths, they were the bedrock of a civilization, carved into stone and pressed into clay. Physical proof of Ninhursag's immense power has been unearthed from the sands of time, offering us a direct line to her worshippers. Among the most personal artifacts are cylinder seals, small stone cylinders engraved with intricate scenes that were rolled onto wet clay to create a signature. On countless seals we find her. She is the figure seated on a throne, often flanked by lion-headed eagles or other sacred animals, wearing that unmistakable omega-shaped crown. This was not just art, it was a declaration of faith, a personal amulet and a bureaucratic stamp all in one, ensuring the Mother Goddess witnessed every transaction and protected every document. Then there are the tablets. Thousands of cuneiform tablets preserve the very words used to praise her. From the city of Nippur, we have hymns that call her the mother of all children, the exalted lady who gives kings their rightful power. But the most complete telling of her legendary conflict with Enki comes from a series of tablets dating to the III period, a golden age of Sumerian literature. This was not a story hidden away, it was a central epic copied and studied by scribes, a theological masterpiece that explained the nature of life, sickness, and healing. To hold one of these tablets is to hold the weight of a 3,000-year-old belief, the very script of fossilized prayer, and we can still walk the ground where those prayers were offered. The foundations of her temple, the E-Kesh in the city of Kesh, have been identified by archaeologists. Though the grand walls are gone, the footprint of the sacred complex remains, a layout of rooms and courtyards that once echoed with chanting priests and the scent of daily offerings. At the site of Tel al-Ubaid, a frieze was discovered showing lion-headed eagles and cattle, imagery intimately tied to her domain over the wild and the domesticated. Each broken wall, each carved seal, and each line of cuneiform is a piece of a colossal puzzle. Together, they form an undeniable picture of a society that lived and breathed its connection to the divine earth, a civilization that built its greatest monuments to honor the ground upon which they stood. Her own people sang her glory in words meant to echo through the ages. We can still hear their voices in the hymns carved into clay, poetic masterpieces that praise Ninhursag not as a distant force, but as a beloved and intimate power. One hymn exalts her as the Mother of the Gods, a title that places her at the very root of the divine family tree. She is the one who gave birth to the great Anunnaki, the deities who decreed the fates. Another line calls her the fashioner of all things, the divine craftswoman whose hands shaped every living creature and the very landscape they inhabited. This was more than flattery, it was a theological statement of her foundational role. But perhaps the most telling epithet is wise counselor. She was not just a womb or a pair of hands, but a mind, a source of profound intelligence who advised the gods and guided the decisions of kings. Listen to the words they wrote for her. You are the mother, you are the father, you are the one who knows what is good. This simple, powerful line captures her complete and encompassing nature. She was both nurturer and authority, the source of life and the source of moral order. How did a civilization use such poetry? These hymns were not simply literature to be read in silence. They were performed, chanted aloud by priests and priestesses during elaborate temple rituals. The rhythmic words, accompanied by music, were believed to be a form of sustenance for the goddess herself. By singing her praises, the community actively maintained its relationship with the earth, feeding her spirit just as she fed their bodies. The poetry reveals a relationship built on a mixture of sheer awe and genuine love. They stood in terror of her power to curse the land with famine, but they also approached her with the tenderness a child reserves for its parent. They saw her as the divine parent who had not only created them, but who continued to watch over their cities, their harvests, and their most vulnerable moments in the birth hut. To read these hymns is to look directly into the heart of Sumerian faith, to understand that their survival depended on maintaining a sacred, poetic conversation with the living world around them. This deep need to see the earth as a mother is a thread woven across the entire tapestry of human belief. The Sumerians were not alone in their vision of a living world. Look to the misty highlands of ancient Greece and you will find Gaia, the primordial earth. She emerged at the very dawn of creation, giving birth to the sky, the mountains, and the sea from her own boundless body. She was the first mother, the foundation upon which the drama of the Greek gods would unfold, just as Ninhursag was the solid ground for the Anunnaki. Travel to the world of Norse sagas and you meet Jord, a personification of the earth who is both the mother of the mighty Thor and the very ground he walks upon. Her name literally means earth, a direct parallel to Ninhursag's identity as Kai. And in the ancient hymns of India, the Rigveda sings of Prithvi, the vast earth, often paired with Dyaus, the sky. This divine couple, Prithvi and Dyaus, are a direct echo of Kai and Anu, the earth and sky whose separation created the world. These goddesses are not carbon copies, but they speak to a universal human instinct. From the Mediterranean to the Indus Valley, our ancestors independently arrived at the same profound conclusion. The soil that feeds us, the landscape that cradles our homes, is not an inert resource. It is a living, breathing, feminine presence, the ultimate source of nourishment. She is the mother of the gods themselves, the womb from which even the most powerful deities were born. This is the Earth Mother archetype, a fundamental pattern in our collective psyche. Why would cultures with no possible contact each envision a divine Earth with such striking similarity? It points to something essential in the human experience, the dependence on the land for survival, the awe inspired by its fertility and its storms, naturally gives rise to the image of a powerful, capricious, and nurturing mother. We project onto the world the same relationship we have with the person who gives us life. This archetype is so powerful because it is rooted in a biological and emotional truth. We come from a mother and we are sustained by the earth. It is a short, intuitive step to see one as the mirror of the other. The stories of Ninhursag are not just Mesopotamian curiosities. They are a local expression of a global truth, a single verse in a planetary hymn to the living world that bore us all. Even with all the stone and clay she left behind, Ninhursag remains a figure shrouded in ancient mystery. Modern scholars are still piecing together her full story, and the gaps in our knowledge raise as many questions as they answer. For instance, what was the true nature of her primordial bond with Anu, the sky god? The myths tell us they were once a single mountain of being, but the details of their early rule together are sparse. Were they seen as co-equals in a balanced cosmic partnership, or did one hold a subtle dominance over the other from the very beginning? This is not just a theological debate. the answer shapes our understanding of how the Sumerians viewed the fundamental relationship between the heavens and the earth. Another enduring puzzle is her fluctuating prominence. In the earliest Sumerian city-states, her authority was absolute and foundational. Yet, as Mesopotamian culture evolved into the Babylonian era, her singular power seems to fragment. Why was a goddess so essential gradually overshadowed by figures like Ishtar? Was this a slow shift in religious focus, moving from the nurturing earth to the dramatic politics of love and war? Or was it a deliberate theological move by emerging empires to consolidate power under different divine patrons? The texts do not give us a clear reason, leaving us to wonder about the political and social currents that reshaped the pantheon. Then there are the fragmented tablets, the broken pieces of poetry and ritual that mention her in passing. A single cryptic line in a damaged hymn can spawn a dozen conflicting interpretations. Does a particular epithet refer to a forgotten aspect of her power, or is it merely a poetic flourish? Without the full context, these fragments become tantalizing clues in an unfinished investigation. This evolving understanding is a vital part of her legacy. It reminds us that ancient faith was not a monolithic, unchanging block, but a living, breathing tradition that shifted with its people. The Earth Mother we are rediscovering today is a mosaic, pieced together from broken seals and partial hymns, and every new archaeological find has the potential to rewrite a piece of her story. Her story echoes because she speaks to the deepest truths of our existence. Ninhursag is one of our first and most profound attempts to understand the world not as a collection of objects, but as a living, breathing subject. She embodies the creative, sustaining, and sometimes terrifying power of nature itself. We see in her the generous mother whose body provides our food, the fierce protector who curses when her boundaries are violated, and the brilliant healer who transforms poison into its own cure. Her entire mythology is a grand exploration of universal cycles, the endless dance between giving and taking, wounding and restoration. This is not a distant, abstract concept. It is the very rhythm of our lives. We plant and we harvest, we build and we weather storms, we fall ill and we recover. Her story with Enki is a perfect mirror of this dance, a divine lesson that creativity without respect for its source leads to sickness, and that true healing requires understanding the root of the wound. She represents the unbreakable bond between life and the earth, a bond we are remembering we share. In an age of environmental crisis, her myth feels less like an ancient tale and more like an urgent parable. The curse she placed on Enki for his gluttonous consumption of the sacred plants is the same consequence we face for exploiting the planet without reciprocity. Her power reminds us that the earth is not a passive resource to be drained, but a dynamic partner in a sacred relationship. To honor Ninhursag is to remember that we, too, are made from her clay, and our survival depends on nurturing the ground from which we came. From the primordial mountain to the sacred soil of every field, Ninhursag's story is the story of life itself. We have walked with the Great Mother from her first moments as half of the cosmic whole, through her role as the shaper of humanity, and into the heart of her sacred garden where betrayal and healing forged a new understanding of the world. She was the creator who pinched the first humans from clay, the nurturer who sustained gods and mortals alike, the fierce protector who cursed a god for his transgressions, and the brilliant healer who birthed salvation from sickness. She was, in her most profound essence, the earth given a name and a spirit. Her legacy is a timeless reminder that the ground beneath our feet is not a passive stage for our dramas, but a living, breathing participant in the cycle of existence. The ancient Sumerians understood that to live was to be in a constant, sacred relationship with her, a relationship built on reciprocity and deep respect. Her myths challenge us to see our own world through that same lens, to recognize that the creative and destructive forces of nature are two sides of the same coin, and that true wisdom lies in honoring the balance. We would love to hear which part of her incredible journey resonated most with you. Was it her power as the creator of all life, her righteous fury, or her profound capacity for healing? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If these deep dives into the heart of ancient mythology inspire you, make sure to subscribe and join us as we continue to uncover the stories that shaped our world.